Thank you. Well, good morning. I think it's still morning. If not, it's good to see each of you. I'm honored to be invited here to speak today. I want to thank the Graduate Council and Robbie for inviting me down to campus to speak. I consider it an honor to be able to present on the same panel as my son. And I know that I've arrived when they invite me to speak on the same panel that he's a part of. My presentation today is about decision making, and I am going to look at some of the boundaries, blind spots, and shortcomings that I've had the opportunity to learn from, as I have spent quite a few years in the healthcare field. I've read and I've heard it said that if an individual spends 10,000 hours or more on a particular subject, that they become fairly well adept at that subject and are considered maybe a subject matter expert. In my career, I've spent 35 years or in excess of 65,000 hours on the job learning about what I'm to present to you today. However, that doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes yet. I certainly do. And I like thinking about what Mr. Welch, former CEO of General Electric, says to his upcoming leaders. Leaders do two things. Number one, they see around corners. That's almost impossible to do, but given the tools that we're going to talk about here momentarily, it becomes a greater possibility to do just that, to see around corners. The other thing, and I find this interesting, is that when a leader falls off his horse, what's the response? They get up, dust themselves off, and get back on the horse. So in spite of the fact that I've logged more than 65,000 hours on the job, I am still learning. I still make mistakes. But for you, the listener, I would like to expose you to some possible tools and just an awareness to help you through the decisions that you make to make it easier for you as you deal with boundaries, blind spots, and shortcomings. In the next 8 to 10 minutes, we'll deal with each of these just very briefly. Let's take a look at the boundaries. It's very interesting, I believe, and I've experienced that who you know affects what you decide. Think about that. Who are the people around you? Who you know does affect what you decide. Very infrequently have I ever read about collaborative overkill. The articles that I read and that I've written and that I promote amongst my staff are collaboration. And a wonderful work by Cross and Thomas in Sloan Management Review, winter 2009, they dealt with that very subject. They said that one of the hurdles that a manager, a supervisor, or educator has to overcome is the fact that one size fits all. There's overkill, and they've broken it down into this group of people that we want to know. What's going on? What did you hear? What's the news? Those are the want to know. They get in the way of decision making, according to Cross and Thomas. And I've lived through enough of that to realize that yes, the want to knows get in the way of what needs to be done. Eventually they may know as we disseminate information to our staff, but in the actual decision making process, managers, directors, noticed that they broke their groups down into a smaller network size, and of the 8 types of advice givers there potentially are in any group that we manage, they only preferred 4. The 4 of those that they preferred to have around them, I'm going to grab my notes, were the harsh truth teller, the loyal partner, the moral compass, and the trustworthy individual. Those are the ones that rose to the top. The others left back here that managers, supervisors, etc., preferred not to have within the mix that got in the way were the star performer. It's all about me. The cheerleader. The deal maker, let's make a deal, and the average Joe. I'm here to clock in, clock out, do my job, etc. So those were the ones that fell out. But the point is that this establishes a boundary. Who you have around you establishes a boundary that you need to navigate around and realize that half of that group, or a larger portion of it, is in the camp we want to know versus we need to know. It's incumbent on the leader to understand how to tease these individuals out. You've been in decision making probably long enough yourselves on a job to know that you have to prioritize out of that group who it is that you need to pull into the inner circle on this or that decision, etc. The second one is blind spots. Almost any organization that you find yourself working in, or whatever industry that might happen to be, there will be a certain amount of bureaucratic layers. The trend now has been, especially over the last 7 years, is to flatten organizations and eliminate middle management, supervision, flatten the organization out. However, for those of you that work in or will work in a highly structured environment, like I have, we'll take healthcare. Healthcare is highly regulated. There are limited options, and there are default rules. You just can't go outside those rules. There are many organizations and businesses, industries that are structured like that. They need to be. That's for safety, patient safety, worker safety, accreditations, etc. They need to be in place. However, you need to understand, as a manager, that limits creativity. If you're having difficulty coming up with solutions that are acceptable to the C-suite, one of the possibilities is that you're surrounded by a bureaucratic layer. So to sum that side of this slide up, the bureaucratic layer, there's a right way and a wrong way. It basically comes down to that. And you may be outside the box if you're trying to decide in a creative way how to solve and decide on certain issues that is unacceptable to those above you. So the culture is important. Rapid change. You're one of the few men or women left standing after 4 or 5 have been swept in a reduction in force, and now you're just swamped. Your role has suddenly changed. So reorganizations, acquisitions, this creates the setting for you to begin making poor decisions, so be aware of this. Who makes the decisions now? You're now doing the job of 4 people. You've inherited new staff. You have new faces to report to. What are the lines of responsibility? Who has the right to say yes or no? Part of this is to just realize that you need to begin, as we'll notice on the next slide, to begin collecting information about that. But that is a scenario and a setting that can set you up for failure if you're not clued into the risk of there not being a clear, delineated path, which seems to fly in the face of the bureaucracy that we were just talking about before. However, bureaucracy recreates itself even as managers, supervisors are being eliminated. There still needs to be decision rights, and those rights are part of knowing how to see around corners, and if we try, we fail, we get back up again, as Jack Welch has said. The last one is shortcomings. Be aware of the shortcomings. We mentioned just on the previous slide about those that are being eliminated from our businesses. That happened where I worked. My job grew logarithmically. And as this little curve says, this is confusion on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, information. I was happily performing my job, actually getting on top of my job, and then there was an elimination of 30 to 40 people from our organization, which did affect me directly. So then I began this logarithmic climb into the confusion area, and information just kept coming and coming and coming. In a great paper in Sloan Management Review, Posner breaks this information down in these situations into a new situation and into a now situation. And he calls these two exploration, exploitation. Let's take this side. Let's explore. These people have just left the organization. They've just exited. They've been asked to leave. The responsibilities that you now have assumed are, you're lost in information. The thing to do is to filtrate, and you already do this. You prioritize. Filtrate is the word they came up for, prioritization. Prioritize what's important today, the next day, the month from now, and what's your timeline for a year out. Begin to prioritize those things, filter, and then with the new associates, the new colleagues, the new directors, etc., the rearrangement that's been taken place, ask, listen, and collect. Begin to ask questions. Listen to what the answers are. Collect information. Hang on to the key information. Pay note of the group dynamics that have changed. And then who has what role and who's going to decide what. Once that has been done, rather than a process and trying to understand why we decide what we decide, we want to optimize. And to do that, we'll exploit the situation. We'll exploit it to the benefit of our customers, our patients, whoever it is we're serving, keeping in mind that the people that work for us, with us, they are our customers. So begin to exploit the situation. Look for trading zones. What can I give up in response to the need? What do you need to give up in order for us to meet this need? Build bridges. We haven't worked before together very close. Now, without that middle manager, I see that you're part of this department. How are we going to build a bridge to get this job done? Merge and share. So finally coming together. I've been able to live through and work through this type of transition, and it works very smoothly. This phase, for instance, in a key service contract that we're going to issue for new patients, took about a month. 5 or 6 intense meetings. What exactly are you asking us to do? What are we doing here? How are we going to get this done? You're asking us to do this. I'm in this information overload. Talk to me. Well, we met several times. We got the bases covered. Once we agreed and we said, yes, we can do that, then we began to exploit. We need help with this. Now that we're 4 months down the road, I can see that this problem has arisen. Can you help us with this? How did you handle that when it was your responsibility, etc.? Works very well, and Posner couches this in excellent paper in the winter issue of Sloan Management Review. So the decision is yours. Will it be yes or will it be no? Hopefully, just in 8 to 10 minutes, there's been enough of a revelation of some new tools, new ideas about making decisions that will help you to see around the corners. And when you do try and you fail, you know what to do. Dust yourself off, get back on your horse. Are there any questions? Yes, Al.
When we were reading and putting this together, and you came across a way to effectively teach this other than experience. And I guess I shouldn't say teach it, to learn it. In other practice. So we can teach this. I could take senior nursing students with no management background. I can give them this information. That doesn't mean they know how to use it.
That's correct. I'm standing here thinking about, it's an excellent question, and I must admit what I have learned is that life usually brings these things across my path. I fail the test, and then I learn the lesson. And there's significance in that because, yes, I can teach this to the business majors or to the nursing students very easily, but they have to live it. And to have this tool begin to see that the exploration and exploitation phases, this takes place over a period of days, weeks, months. We're in the middle of it. But again, that goes back to having the right people around you at the right time. And I'm pulling a blank on this, folks. Can you help me? And that's where your trusted partners, your moral compass come in and say, John, don't go there. Here's why. I say, thank you. So like Jack Welch, again, I like reading about Jack Welch. He always made sure that he had people around him that were smarter than him. And that's one of the things I can say. Yes, we can teach this. It's a model of sorts, but it's not a decision tree. And experience is rough. Experience, sometimes your tail is between your legs, and it's just very rough out there. And that's really the only way to learn this. But having read this, we expose students to it. When they find themselves in those tough situations, then they can just resort back to, okay, here's the concept. I can apply the concept and let's see if that works. Long answer for short question. Thanks. Sorry about that. Any others? Well, then thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.